thank you for inviting me to speak at your conference. And I'm really sorry that I don't speak any Russian. As you probably already know from the Russian introduction, my name is Ulla Bomman, and I have been working with Easy Language in Sweden since 2001. First at the Center for Easy to Read in Stockholm, and then at the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media, MTM. But since the year 2018, I'm running my own consultancy business in the field of accessible information, easy language, and human rights. And I will talk to you today about the development of easy language in Sweden and the impact of easy language in my country. But first of all, I want to clarify the vocabulary. So far, there is not an international consensus regarding what word to use in English, easy language or easy to read. And this is important to point out. Each country which works with easy language has its own word in their native language. In Sweden, that is called lättläst. And translated into English, this means easy to read. And since Sweden took a leading role internationally with making texts accessible for people with reading difficulties, the Swedish word was translated and became easy to read in English. And at first, easy to read referred to written texts only, but today the easy to read concept covers both written language and the verbal language that is easy to understand. And in this presentation, I will mainly use easy language, the term easy language. But if I say the word easy to read, you should know that it is the same as easy language. Okay, let's start from the very beginning. The 1960s in Sweden was in many ways a radical time of change, like it was in many other Western countries. It was a time when the solidarity movement was strong. There was a focus on human rights with the ratification of the two United Nations conventions, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. It was a focus on equality and women's liberation and the need for strengthening the democracy, more power to the people. And of course, lots of love, peace, and understanding. And during this era, an awareness grew that for all citizens to have equal rights and participate in the democracy, the language the authorities used for communication needed to be more accessible and more easy to understand. And it was in this setting that easy language was born in Sweden. And its growth was parallel with the growth of plain language. And let me just say a few words about plain language versus easy language. Plain language is a language without bureaucratic words, with a simple but correct construction of sentences. And all authorities in Sweden are obliged to use plain language in their communication to the public. Plain language should be the standard language. But plain language do not focus specially on people with challenges. It doesn't focus on a challenged target group. And therefore, easy language is needed as a complement to plain language. Easy language, on the other hand, focus on a reader with challenges or difficulties. Plain language focus on a reader of the general public with no specific difficulties. And exactly where the line is between easy language and plain language is impossible to say. Both are needed, and as I say, they should complement each other. I said that the easy language has the challenged reader in focus, and it has the reader in focus in regards to the content, the language, considering construction of sentences, as well as using active form, simple words, avoiding expressions, etc. It also has the reader in focus in regards to the presentation. The presentation must be easy to read and easy to understand, both the layout and all the pictures and illustrations you use. Okay, so that is about plain language versus easy language. Let us return to the very beginning. Already in 1967, the Swedish government produced guidelines for a more simplified legal and judicial language. And it was the start in Sweden for the plain language movement. And about the same time, there was a political initiative called Culture for Everyone. And that was highly linked to everyone's right to participate in society and to have access to culture. And as a disability initiative, the first book in easy language was produced in Sweden. And the target group for this book and for the easy language was people with intellectual disabilities. And I just have some fun trivia for you now. The very first book in easy language in Sweden was the book Summer with Monica by the Swedish author Per Anders Fogelström. The book is about love between young people, and it is quite descriptive when it comes to a teenage girl's sexual awakening and liberation. And the original book was published already in 1951. And a couple of years later, the Swedish film director Ingmar Bergman, he turned the book into a controversial movie with some really shocking nude scenes. And I guess he gave us Swedish girls a bad reputation all over the world. But this is a good example of what was stated from the very beginning of this easy language movement in Sweden. It was said, it is of great importance not to underestimate the readers or believe that they are different from other readers except for their reading ability. And therefore, popular books and books people were talking about should be accessible also for persons with reading difficulties. And the books in easy language were produced. And the first ones were adaptations of already published books, like Summer with Monica. But throughout the years, more and more books were original stories written in easy language to begin with. And today, the majority of all easy language books in Sweden are original literature. They are not adaptations. And there has been more than 1,500 books published in easy language since the very beginning. In the 1970s, I said that the book production started at the end of the 1960s. But in the early 1970s, the first newspaper in Sweden in easy language was published. And it was called later on, it was called 8 pages. And the first issue of 8 pages, 8 sidor, came in 1984. And here you can see the front page of the first issue of the easy to read newspaper, 8 pages. And the newspaper is still being published on a weekly basis today. But before 8 pages started in 1984, during the 1970s, there were other newspapers, or another newspaper that kind of started the whole project with easy language newspapers. And then in the mid-1980s, the Swedish parliament unanimously decided upon the start of a center for easy to read. The mission and the responsibility for the center was to publish books and to publish the newspaper 8 sidor, the newspaper 8 pages, in easy language, and to develop and promote easy language in Sweden. And the center received annual financial grants from the Ministry of Culture in Sweden. And about 10 years later, from the late 1990s, the Center for Easy to Read also produced lots of informative texts for authorities on all levels, for NGOs, and also for some private companies. And this work was done on commission. This was not financed by government grants. It was financed by, the work was done on commission. And some examples of what kind of information that was produced in easy language was news about elections, about new bills, new laws being passed, the work of the Swedish parliament, and all sorts of important information to the public from national, regional, or local authorities. The center even made an easy language version of information on how to use your prescribed Viagra. So the subjects of the information that were adapted into easy language was very, very wide. Easy language was developed in Sweden through learning by doing. And already from the early years, the Center for Easy to Read had contact with professionals working with the target group, such as teachers and staff in assisted housing. In the beginning, there was some resistance to have close contact with the readers. It was not considered in the beginning to be of any value, as people did not believe that the target group would be capable of giving constructive feedback. But this has changed over the years, and Center for Easy to Read developed close contact with the end readers, the end users of the books and the newspaper. And representatives from the target group participated in focus groups, tested texts before publication, and evaluated already published material. In the early 2000s, internet boomed. And when internet boomed, there was a belief that if information is put on a website, the information automatically was accessible for the public. And Center for Easy to Read was very active in pointing out that that is wrong. A person who needs easy language very often has difficulties in using a website and difficulties in finding information. And therefore, if information is to be accessible, it has to be easy to find, easy to read, and easy to understand. And that also became the key words for describing what accessible information is. And accessible information in easy language. It is information that is easy to find, easy to read, and easy to understand. And thanks to the persistent work of the Center for Easy to Read, by the year of 2010, most websites of official authorities in Sweden had information in easy language in a special section of their website. And the example that I'm showing now is from the Swedish Consumer Agency. And the arrow, the green arrow at the top, points to the link to the Easy Language web room. If you press the link, you enter the easy to read or easy language part of the website. And it mirrors the information on the original website, but everything is in easy language. The work of the Center for Easy to Read really put easy language on the agenda in Sweden. The center trained a number of communication officers from authorities on all levels and from a number of different organizations. The center gave presentations about accessible information and the need for accessible information and about easy language, besides producing news, literature, and informative texts in easy language. Slowly but gradually, easy language became accepted in Sweden as an accessible format, equal to and just as needed as Braille, sign language, or audio versions. And accessible communication is defined as mandatory by the Swedish Language Act, the Discrimination Act, and since last year, also in the new law regarding digital accessibility, following the web content accessibility guidelines that was produced by the European Union. When it comes to target group, I've told you that at first, the target group for easy language in Sweden was persons with intellectual disabilities. But the target group expanded as the acceptance of easy language increased and also the knowledge about easy language increased. Anyone who has problems with the original text, the standard text, is part of the easy language target group today, which includes people with a wide range of disabilities, permanent or temporary, concentration difficulties, persons who have Swedish as a second language, untrained readers, and so on. We live in a society of technology and information, and the fast development of our technology and information society increase the amount of information we must handle and process. And therefore, information in easy language may be beneficial also for people with high reading skills. A summary of any kind of information in easy language is a fast way to get a general idea about something. And I must say that more and more people with good reading skills are finding easy language summaries beneficial, not to mention the parliamentarians who must process several thousands of pages of written text every month. At the end of year 2014, the Center for Easy to Read was closed down, and the national responsibility for easy language was transferred the 1st of January 2015 to the Swedish Agency for Accessible Media, MTM. And MTM is an agency that primarily works with Braille and audio versions of books, newspapers, and in a limited extent, also with informative text. In my opinion, Easy Language do not have the same focus or priority for the agency as it had during the Center for Easy to Read era. Easy Language is still accepted, but there is no quality control or lobbying carried out. And there is not a continuing development of the Easy Language in my country at the moment. And as of today, no university or other official entity in Sweden is offering training how to write Easy Language. And you've just heard the presentation from colleagues in Germany, and the situation in Germany is very different on an academic level. And the very limited training offered in Sweden is carried out by private consultants like myself and a handful of translation companies. But I do believe that Sweden has become more accessible and that inclusion has increased by Easy Language being accepted as an accessible format. And there is a greater awareness by the general public about the right to have an Easy Language version of information from an authority. One example of a positive change is the website Alla väljare. And Alla väljare means all voters. It is a permanent website financed by federal grants with information about democracy, elections, political parties in Easy Language. And at election times, and we have elections every 4 years in Sweden to the national parliaments, and every 5 years it is election to the European Union. And at election times, there is a possibility to ask questions directly to the politicians via the website. And the site is run by the Easy Language newspaper, 8 sidor, 8 pages. I started with the very beginning in my presentation. And since 1960s or the 1960s, we have in Sweden moved from giving some culture for the handicapped to everyone's right to have access to literature, news, and information. And we have moved from accessibility being elevators and ramps for wheelchairs to equal rights to participate in society for everyone. And a vital part to reach society for all is for people to have equal access to information regardless of disability or literacy. And a number of political initiatives and legislation have moved the country in this direction. And that has been really important for this development. And as for the future, I don't think that the fast production of information will slow down. I think the amount of information will continue to increase rapidly, which means that it will be more and more difficult to decide what information to look for and to find, to choose and to process. And information in Easy Language is crucial for decreasing the information gap and therefore important for participation and inclusion. Information has become more easy in general in Sweden, but I do hope that all information in the future will start with a brief summary in Easy English, in Easy Language, and then give options on how to get to know more, either by read more here or contact us to ask questions or look at this video and so on. Because to me, all of this comes down to the respect of our equal human rights. We have equal rights, but we have different needs. We have different difficulties, and we have very individual needs. One size doesn't fit all. One solution or one type of information cannot fit all. Therefore, we must be open to provide citizens with a wide range of different ways to have access to information. Information must be accessible for each and every one of us. We all should be able to find, to read, and to understand the information. And easy language is one important format for the respect of human rights, for accessibility, and for inclusion. So thank you for your attention and good luck with your work with easy language.